I'm Ralph Danola, CEO at New Buildings Institute. Before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping things to tell you about. First, you are muted and we cannot hear you. This helps to keep the background noise down so that we can encourage, so that everyone can hear the speakers better. I want to direct you to the dashboard that you should be able to see on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're having technical difficulties and cannot see the slides or our speakers, you can use the question pane in this dashboard to let us know, and we will help you as we go. We'll take questions at the end of the webinar, but you can ask questions at any time during the session using that same question pane. At the end of the webinar, you will be given the opportunity to take a short survey, and we would love to have your feedback. I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors for this, and thank you so much, sponsors, for making this webinar possible. And I also would like to just give you a brief introduction to New Buildings Institute. NBI is a nonprofit based in Portland, Oregon. We are celebrating our 20th year, and we've been focused on commercial building energy efficiency and advancing industry practices, and this Zero Net Energy webinar is a significant part of that. Our theory of change at NBI starts with having a vision for what is needed in the building industry, and advanced vision through our thought leadership and working with partner organizations and industry leadership. And then we move into research. So we do research such as what we're presenting today that helps to provide the industry with background information. That research then leads to us developing technical solutions for the practitioners in the industry. And then we move those lessons and those tools into advancing codes, and that's our theory of change. We have 5 speakers today. Leading off is Kathy Higgins, Research Director here at New Buildings Institute, who will give us a background on Z&E trends and the 2016 buildings list published in October of 2016. Then we have our ZEDx presenters. We'll lead off with Brett Moss, Training Director at Net Zero Plus Electrical Training Institute, who will be presenting best practices for achieving net zero energy for existing commercial buildings through extensive retrofits. Then we have Neil Bulger, Managing Principal from Integral Group, who will be presenting Designing for Resilient and Net Zero Energy Buildings. Then Andrew Bush, Managing Partner of Morgan Creek Ventures, who will be speaking about the Boulder Commons project. And finally, we have Kenner Kingston of Architectural Nexus, who will be presenting Turning Passive Occupants into Active Inhabitants. I'd like to pass the presentation over to Kathy Higgins, our Research Director here at NBI.
Thank you, Ralph, and good morning. This is a great group of people, and I want to let people on the webinar know that this group spoke at our Getting to Zero Forum in Denver this October. Here's the opening to the section that I'll be speaking to, which is the release of our 2016 list of zero net energy buildings. At our forum in Denver, Colorado, we had a really fantastic group of people come together to deal with both thought leadership, to deal with the industry issues, and to network change best practices in this leading area of net zero. It was interesting to recently get the breakdown of industry attendees at the group. There were at the bottom of the slide here that our top 3 topic areas were focused on designing and delivering zero net energy projects. The second most popular topic was to policies and programs. So that's what at NBI we're particularly focused on, is combining the best practices from practitioners and then helping policies and programs move those best practices into permanent solutions. And then third, at the forum in Denver, where the group of people you're hearing today were gathered, the owner and developer's perspective is a really critical and emerging part of this trend towards getting buildings to be zero net energy. So one of the things that's going on as I introduce the trends in zero net energy buildings is that there's a lot of different terms, and I'm sure many of you on the phone have grappled with this range of vocabulary that's going on. And I just want to start this topic by pointing out that all these terms have in common really moving buildings to be energy efficient, combining renewables into that package of building technologies, and also then moving the building to be more environmentally sound. So regardless of the names, I'm just going to introduce that the terms that we've used in our report and that I'll be using right now today are zero net energy, and we verify buildings at NBI to be zero net energy by looking at their data and verifying that they've achieved 12 months or more of zero net energy performance, meaning that they've produced on an annual basis as much or more energy than the building used on an annual basis. Emerging zero net energy buildings are those buildings we're tracking because we keep a pulse in entire North America on buildings that are in any phase of moving towards zero net energy. So emerging may be in design, concept, construction, or not yet have provided a year of 12 months of data where they did meet the zero net energy definition. Ultra low energy buildings are buildings that are the same in design, but may not have renewables in their intention or in their building. We verify the buildings in both site and source energy, and we have a new term that's developing called Zero Energy Performance Index, and you'll see that in our report. We hope you'll take a look at the report, and let me give you some of the findings from that. We've been doing this study for a number of years here, 6, 7 years. We've been keeping track on the market as buildings moved from very good practice to zero net energy. And here you see the evolution of increasing quantity of buildings that we're able to find. I want to emphasize we are not able to find all the buildings that are going on. And you'll see at the end of my presentation a place that you can register your projects and contribute to this public list of buildings. So we currently have over 400 buildings. At the forum we have 394. Due to that forum and people like you on the phone, we've increased the list to 430. And these buildings are verified, as I mentioned, emerging or ultra-low energy. Energy performance is really the metric that's key to looking at whether a building's achieving very good energy performance and renewables. So it's fantastic to see that after metrics that in 2003 on the left-hand side of the slide defined a code built, or these are actually measured performance buildings in ZEDx 2003, that the best buildings under ZEDx, the average buildings, were at an EUI, energy use intensity, which is the kilo BTUs per square foot per year, we're around 93. And you see on the chart as they move down over here that the verified buildings we have now are all performing at about a quarter the energy use of a comparable building in the United States today, as indicated here by the 2012 ZEDx. So these buildings are meeting both occupant, owner, and energy performance with EUIs that are a quarter the amount of a typical building. And then at the net definition, then they're replacing that, as you see here on the right, with renewables that offset that energy use. Pretty excited to have buildings over this time period. We've been monitoring buildings that represent a wide range of locales throughout the United States and North America. We just located a building in Connecticut that's zero net energy, so we're going to be filling that state in there. So we've got the majority of the country, and we're really anxious to see this map become a complete covered area of buildings that are best practices and that we can share with others in the country buildings in their regions. And that regions helps us represent that the climate zones that used to be said that only very mild climates or only areas that were very temperate could have buildings that could meet their full energy use with on-site renewables. But you can see from this map that that's not true. We have verified and emerging buildings throughout the climate zones in North America. One of the interesting things for those of you on the phone is the ability to pull out from the NBI database buildings in your region, look for comparables, use these buildings as examples with your clients, and demonstrate the ability and the practices of these other buildings in the regions where you're located. When we first started looking at this research, the buildings were fundamentally low square footage, small square footage, and public buildings. But today, we're really excited to see a trend towards larger buildings, more market type buildings. And in this graph, you notice that this is buildings only above 25,000 square feet, but we're seeing a growth in the mid-size 50K to 100K buildings and over 100,000 square feet. This helps us recognize that buildings that are more market typical can and are being driven to net zero performance. The building types is always a question we get, and as I said, this trend began with public buildings and is still dominated by education buildings, as you see on the right-hand side. 38% of the buildings are education, schools, both K through 12 and universities. But on the left graph, you see that we've got a really fantastic trend in the increase in private for-profit buildings. And again, that moves where the public part of the sector demonstrates and begins and invests for public benefits, and then the private sector is not only just following, they are now leading. You know, the practitioners and the building owners in the private sector are seeing this as an advantage in many metrics in terms of financial, market attraction, and as well as kind of future-proofing their building for the energy aspects. Since schools remains the current dominant building type, we think it's interesting to look at where that activity is. Certainly throughout our database, California has the largest amount of buildings and thus also the largest amount of schools. But Kentucky, North Carolina, Texas, South Carolina, a lot of activity going on in the school sector. And this is going to be increasing, we think, as the attributes of zero net energy and public benefits is demonstrated through these beginning school districts. I want to mention that codes and policies are already trending very strongly towards adopting zero net energy policies and criteria in things like the IECC, the IGCC, the International Green Codes. And this is just a single slide to show that MBI and the world that we're in terms of all of us on the phone working in buildings, that there are a lot of activities at the state level, a great amount of activities at the city level, and as well as at organizations like ASHRAE and IECC. So we have other presentations probably later this year that dive deeper on policies. If you're interested in that, we will definitely be covering this topic. So as a closing item to my section, I want the people on the phone to be sure to recognize that those resources are public. We're a nonprofit. We're funded by some public entities and foundations, and the resources we have on our website are available to you, and you just can get to the website. The URL is at the bottom here. There's some examples of the things that we produced and that we use to help change the market and accelerate the adoption of zero net energy buildings. The one that's in red I want to emphasize, I'm going to use my mouse over here, so that if you go to our website and click here in the zero net energy part at the top of the website, you'll move to the pages that are dive deeper on this topic. And again, we want you to share your projects with us. It's a very simple online form. Let us know about something. If you go in and see the report and a building you know about isn't listed, let us know, please. You can get information on state specifics, particularly in California. We're tracking the state of California activity. We offer workshops throughout the country on early adopters and especially to public entities, municipalities, school districts. And this is definitely the go-to e-document that you can sign up for if you're interested in just seeing what's going on, and we track this and we put this out quarterly. So thank you very much, and I want to move to our next speaker, who is Brett Moss at IBEW. Okay, Brett,
I'm here. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. I'm on the West Coast, so I'm going to go with a good morning. Let's see. Let me see if I can advance slide.
There you go.
Here I am. All right. So what we are looking at right here is well, what we were looking at. Sorry, a little bit of technical issues on my side here. There we go. What we're looking at is the front of our building. Again, as the title talks about, this project really does away with the myth that in order to get to a net zero building, it must be from new construction. This was a solid retrofit project. Again, what we're looking at is the front of our building. Not only is it the sign that we're looking at, but the support for that sign is in fact a solar shade structure. We are an emerging building. We've completed construction around summertime, and so we're definitely in the less than 12-month time frame for our net zero certification. You know, I apologize. I am seemingly unable to advance slides. Maybe somebody else can take control back over to me, and I'll just ask for a slide advance if that would be okay, please.
I've got it, Brett.
Thank you. All right, so what we're looking at here is a layout of our facility. Again, I've got just over 142,000 square feet of building space here. The original building was constructed in 1955. We did a couple of renovations and additions, one in the 60s and one in the very early 2000s. The cost for this retrofit was about $113 per square foot. Our EIU is a 16. Again, what we're looking at here is the building itself and the different features, the different components, and then everything that was touched as part of this retrofit. We'll go through those one slide at a time. If you get the next slide, please. There we go. Thank you. So we looked, before we started the project, we did a very intense energy and building audit. We used Stoke. They're a company located in Northern California. They were a consultant on the project. But part of this was we went through the entire building envelope. The bottom part of this slide, again, you can see on the right side my shade structure. On the left side, that's a large group of windows, and we've installed electrochromic glass for shading on this long hallway of the school. When the sun hits it, it will automatically, it's got sensors on the outside of the building, it will automatically shade and drop the temperature on the inside. Space, we've used fans, we use exhaust fans to help make the temperature comfortable. Next slide, please. Our next slide, we'll talk about our plug load and the hot water. We've reduced the energy used for the hot water by about 93%. We've extensively looked at our plug load. Interestingly, by using solid lighting control and HVAC control, our new problem load if you will, is in fact my plug load. My plug load is the biggest load on site. We're looking in the classrooms at deploying LED projectors and micro computers to help drop that plug load as well. Next slide, please. Through the use of new LED lights and advanced lighting controls, again, we dropped that lighting load. That lighting load is now lower than my plug load. With LED lights, we found that brand new LEDs can be tuned down. So we've tuned all of the new lights inside of the building down to 80%. So when we've got 100% lighting going on, it's in fact only 80% of those LED lights, and we can continue to tune those down as needed. Next slide, please. For a number of reasons, because we're a school and we're certainly in the public eye, we have extensive use of dashboards. What you're looking at are 4 of the 9 dashboards that are here on site. These are touch sensitive, soon to be available on the school's website, but what they do is they allow interaction between, whether it's my students, whether it's my instructors, whether it's people that we're touring, people from the industry, architects, engineers, contractors, public officials, to really get a feel for what the building is doing, what the systems are doing, what they're doing today, and what they've done historically over a time period. Next slide, please. What we're looking at here are some of the solar panels that are on our rooftop, and to the right side, what we're looking at are 2 of the cabinets. The cabinet closest to you, the darker gray, houses our inverter. We've got 2 of these newer inverters. These are capable of both being grid connected, as well as they've got the ability to island themselves. So a lot of this project is about resilience. The cabinet, the lighter colored cabinet right behind it, is the battery storage cabinet. So we are overproducing. Again, that's where we come the name Net Zero Plus. That plus is the overproduction is stored in the form of utility grade lithium-ion battery. In the event of an outage that takes us overnight, we can discharge those batteries and use this as an emergency operations center. Again, as well as during the daytime, we can island the building. So we disconnect from the grid and we continue to operate. Next slide, please. What we're in now is a graphical layout of our microgrid. Again, it shows the components that are integral to my microgrid. I will add that we've got the ability with the microgrid, excuse me, to participate in utilities automatic demand response. We've got the ability to also use the stored energy or the system itself to do peak shaving at times as well. We also have electric vehicle chargers. Currently we have 8 of them on site. The system is capable of both not only grid to vehicle, but the system is also capable to work within the vehicle to grid charging. So that's where we take energy from those cars, the stored energy in the batteries of the cars, and we can use them to, in fact, also power the building. Next slide, please. Again, for more information, we were featured in a PBS documentary. The title of that documentary is Building Below Zero. It's still available for streaming to view on the PBS website. Next slide, please. it's critical when you start a project like this that you make sure that you team yourself with a highly qualified and trained workforce. Next slide, please. We are affiliated with the Electrical Training Alliance, the IBW, that's the Electrical Workers Union, and the National Electrical Contractors Association. Unfortunately, for our friends north of the border, we don't show anything in Canada, but we cover both the United States and Canada. There is training that is being completed now that will make sure that electrical workers and the contractors in the U.S. and Canada are trained to do these projects. Next slide, please. There we go. So here's contact information for all of those people on the slide. For those in Canada, you can certainly reach out to Mir Mustafa or to Ray Kazmark, and they can get you in touch with people to help you out on the projects. Next slide, please. There we go. This is where I say thank you very much.
Thank you, Brett. I'm passing the controls, and we'll see if Brett issues with moving the slides forward is not a part of Neil Bolger, who is a principal at Integral Group. I'm going to put his slide up, and that will maybe reduce the delay between slides. Neil, do you have control?
All right.
I want to remind people to write in questions, to type in questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Bolger, and as Kathy was saying, I'm a principal at Integral Group in Oakland, California. And today I wanted to talk about the built environment and share some design strategies for resilient and net zero energy buildings. Since most people know what a net zero energy building is by now, I will define a resilient building as one able to maintain life support conditions even during an extreme event, such as a heat wave, storm, or power outage. And the key piece of life support conditions is this ability to maintain a level of comfort at all times. And two strategies I want to talk about today are at the core of this idea of mitigating extreme heat waves. And those are managing radiant comfort and good air movement. In buildings, we are really still learning how to really keep people comfortable. New research continues to show that comfort is much more of a dynamic experience than just the air temperature and our activity levels in buildings. Yet most buildings, the design requirements are often very marginal in their criteria. Often a lot of construction projects we work on will see very minimal effort put into defining the ranges. Statements like 70 to 75 degrees must be maintained at all times, or advertising for people to move into an office saying each office has a personal thermostat in it, or one of my favorite ones that I've seen in different ways of marketing offices is this idea of plenty of air conditioning, that more is better. And you know, an article back in the New Yorker in 2015 pointed out that how many of our heat metrics were actually based on studies back in the 70s, and the amount of heat our body gives off was actually based on a 40-year-old man that weighed 150 pounds. So chances are today that if you're a woman in that same environment, most likely you are probably cold. So with all this research that's now emerging in our fields, generically speaking, we can say that humans love radiant comfort. Most of the ways we exchange heat with our surrounding environment is from the radiant surface that all our skin can see, be it the walls, the glass, the floor, the ceilings, and so forth. And so the Center for the Built Environment at Berkeley is a group that's doing a lot of research and currently digging into radiant cooling and heating comfort systems in a 3-year study and mapping the body to understand where at different parts of our body do we feel comfort sensations. Work we've done has found that radiant HVAC systems are often very comfortable, very low energy, and could be much smaller than conventional systems. in one paper in Denmark, they found that radiant systems are even able to keep people comfortable when they run at 50% of their designed capacity. So this means the buildings could operate at lower peak demands and even ride through peak heat waves without critically impacting the comfort of them inside, allowing them to be very low energy and, as I was mentioning, have very low demand. A second key strategy that I want to share with everyone today is the idea of designing, if a slide will switch here, go on, here we go, designing with ceiling fans. Another wonderful sayism here is, we love ceiling fans. And more than just the small ceiling fans that people might bring with them if their office isn't quite the condition they want, they might buy at Target and bring into their desk. Elegant ceiling fans. And architects and engineers really need to be able to design intentionally with these fans as part of the key systems that can provide comfort to people in classrooms and office buildings. And much like radiant, there's actually very little research on the true effectiveness of one fan versus another. And as we speak, there's also another research project, again at Berkeley, developing test procedures and design guides to give the built environment designers a better sense of which fan can provide different comfort at different design configurations. And even a small fan running at 2 to 30 watts can help mix the air temperature and really provide adaptive comfort to people even at higher elevated temperatures. Initial research that was done over 5-6 years ago here by Guel and Paliaga can show just how you can design and put in different comfort criteria using fans throughout a building. And it's when we can combine these strategies that we start to see very, very low energy results. A radiant building with good air movement can almost multiply these benefits and improve both the capacity of the system, greatly increasing how much cooling or heating you can get out of it, while also mixing and providing fresh air or recirculating air across people's bodies and balancing the comfort that they experience. So some ideas just to leave everyone with, if we'll go here. So for future-ready buildings, you can start to even see here, it's going to come up. Some of the research they're showing is that even when we start to block a ceiling with acoustical panels to try and get a noise level that isn't too high, even adding a small fan in the right location can not only balance out the cooling that ceiling can provide, it can increase the cooling capacity even further, mixing that air and providing the same amount of cooling we might need to manage a peak load and keep systems simple and low energy to operate. So for future ready buildings, let's see here. I'm going to pause for a second while I flip through my slides. So some ideas that I'll leave you all with here. So for future ready buildings, just remember less cooling can mean the same comfort. A good design doesn't have to be dependent upon how much cooling is installed in the building. Ceiling fans for all, how much can they really cost when you start to look at the great quality of space these can provide in all applications? And that both these strategies, when combined together, end up being best friends forever with systems such as battery backups and simple solar systems in buildings that can ride through peak heat waves in critical times. There we go. So keep a lookout, question the right criteria for your buildings and bring some of the leading research into your projects to share some of these great ideas that are only now starting to emerge from different universities around the world. And
thank you, Neil.
that,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to give this pause because we have 4 speakers and see if Stacy has any questions that people have put in, just a couple for the first part of the webinar. Stacy, do you have anything you can share? Any questions that our speakers can address?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, excellent.
Okay. So there are a couple questions, and some of them, Kathy, are around the definitions that you raised, early in this presentation. So I'm kind of taking you back a little bit. But there were questions around, so if a building has 100% renewables, but it's all off-site renewable energy, how is that categorized?
For the definition that NBI is using, and which is generally compatible across the country, off-site renewables are not counted towards the zero net energy building.
Okay. And then just to confirm, go ahead.
The Department of Energy has a fourth tier where there is a definition of a zero net energy building with off-site, but in the data that you're looking at here and in the market term, it's on-site renewables. Go ahead.
Okay, and then just a definition question related to zero net energy and living building. The difference between those two definitions.
Oh, certainly, and actually we're going to see, I think Andy Bush, who's speaking next, will refer to that as well. Living buildings are a certification under the Living Future Institute, and it's a particular certification for a building that has a wide range of attributes, of which zero net energy is one petal of the flower symbol used to denote a number of measures that the building has done to become very low carbon, low energy, good health attributes. So it's just a system of labeling, just like U.S. Green Buildings Council LEED label is. Living building is a label of a Living Future Institute.
Okay. And then lastly, just in terms of emerging buildings and the list of emerging that you had, how many of those fail to emerge? I mean, how is that calculated and judged?
Oh, great question. And that's an item that comes up frequently in our research. A building may have targeted net zero energy, and they may take a number of years through commissioning their systems or through variabilities with density of occupancy, change in hours, change in weather. They may not get over the hump in terms of production exceeding use, or they may get there 1 year and not the next. We want to emphasize that the net zero line is a line that you are constantly moving above and below, potentially, depending upon the amount of renewables you put on. It's the striving for the goal in the design and operational practices that is critical. The majority of them do get there, and the majority of them get verified net zero through operational refinements, and as Brett emphasized, through plug load issues. So.
Okay, great. There is one particular to fans. So there were, just a heads up, a lot of people really like the use of the fans. But there was just a question about, and this may or may not be answerable here, but I think I would just say for everybody, questions we can follow up with directly. But the question relates to, how do you ensure the engineering team calculates the actual use of fans in the energy strategy? Like, is there a best practice for doing that, and is that known? I think we can provide it as resources after, but I think that's a question for the panelists.
You can just point to the newest version of the ASHRAE comfort standard and say, please design to an expanded range of comfort. The CBE has done a lot on their website to explain how to align air movement with the range of temperatures satisfied, and I've seen clients specify that in their RFPs on projects, but we can follow up with more detail too if you like.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. And we'll have another Q&A at the completion of the next two speakers. So I want to introduce Andy Bush from Morgan Creek Ventures, who's a managing partner, and he's going to speak to the Boulder Commons. And Andy, you should have control now.
Great. And Kathy, can you hear me? Does it sound good?
Yes, your audio is good. Thanks for checking.
Great. Thank you, everybody. My name is Andy Bush. I'm a partner and founder of Morgan Creek Ventures, and the project that I'm going to talk about is what we call the It's two buildings. In this slide, it kind of looks like four, but that's intentional in terms of the design. To break down the scale, it's a mixed-use office and retail project. with the goal of net zero, and at the same time we've reserved or caveated that based on a small restaurant space that we're doing, and we can talk a little bit about that. We produce on an annualized basis, or have modeled with Integral's help to produce approximately 25 EUIs per square foot. On an annualized basis, we're expected to consume somewhere in the 23.5 range without the restaurant. So we have a small margin, most of, probably all of which will be eaten up by the restaurant. And the building is under construction, and we expect the initial occupancy in late 2017. Seeing if my slide will switch here. Kathy, it looks like I don't have control either. So I may have to give control back to you. Okay, thank you. So it's located in a TOD, if we can go back one, but it's located in a TOD, transit-oriented development in Boulder, Colorado, meant to be Boulder's kind of second core. And over the course of the next year, there'll be approximately 1 million square feet developed in that area around a regional bus station that includes a Google regional headquarters, several hundred, almost 1,000 residential units. We're building the green building that's at Boulder Commons in the top left portion of the screen, and our second phase next to it will be another 100,000 square feet. Next slide.
Go ahead and push your arrow, Andy, because I think you were forwarding them. There you go.
Good.
Great.
And for some reason on my screen, I can't see that it's been forwarded. No, there we go. It's just a little delay for me. So the building, the idea was to do market rate, net zero building that was multi-tenanted. So that created a series of requirements that some of which is done for other nonprofit buildings in terms of certain strategies that are controlled by one user we couldn't do. And we decided that we wanted daylit, efficient, flexible floor plans that could be changed over time, and we wanted to do it with off-the-shelf components. So simple strategies, narrow floor plates, variable refrigerant volume system, a simple composite steel structure with slightly thickened slabs, windows that are gas-filled and fiberglass framed and insulated, and then a really tight building envelope, essentially an insulated wall with minimal on the exterior, all LED lighting. So nothing extremely leading edge. Our goal was to be on the leading edge, not on the bleeding edge, and to create a building that we could over time modify tenants and change the configuration of. Kathy, has the slide changed?
No, I'm glad to move them for you.
Okay.
There we go. I'll move them. Mm-hmm.
So next slide. And the spaces are designed in kind of an interesting configuration because we wanted narrow floor plans, 65 feet wide on average, but we also wanted some larger floor plans that there wasn't too much of the area eaten up by the core, the area shown in gray here. We actually created a modified H-shaped form. And that H-shaped form has 10 sides, all of which have glazing on them. So it allows for a wonderfully daylit floor without the core eating up too much of that floor. Next slide. And the windows are actually tuned on each side of the building. So on the east side of the building, we're approximately 35%, growing to about 50% on the southern end of the building. This is the west side, and it's about 40% glazing. So even though we're trying to create a highly insulated building with a tight thermal properties, we do have a lot of glazing, and it's really quite impressive when you get inside the space, which they're putting windows in now, to see how wonderfully daylit it is, even though we did try to limit glazing as a portion of it. Next slide. From a solar production standpoint, we're using the roof of the building, with the exception of a few portions of a roof deck, and then we're doing the whole southeast wall as a solar wall. As we modeled the project with Integral, what we realized was that we were getting approximately 70% as much energy on that southeast wall as we were on the roof. And so we decided to create a solar rain screen and essentially use solar panels as sidings. Well, it seemed like a pretty straight and easy concept when we began, and we were told by a number of people that lots of other people had done solar walls. As it turns out, very few people have done vertical solar walls with windows in them, and even fewer have done vertical solar walls with vertical windows in horizontal. We found a fairly straightforward solution. Just we're using for testing most of the metal panel. As I said, produces about 25 EUIs per square foot. It's 1,800 panels. Return on value or return on investment at a market rate. So without thinking about depreciation and tax credits, which we are looking at, the total solar cost is $2.3 million. I put the cross up because we started at $1.9 million. By the time we got through all of the details associated with attaching the vertical wall and meeting the most current wind loads, our price got up to $2.3 million. And what we did was we looked around as a developer might at the market, and we said, what are people paying for similar office buildings in terms of energy? And the range that we came up with was $1.80 to about $2.50 a square foot. What was the average office building in this Boulder area was paying? So what we did was we added $1.90 a foot on the top of the base rent. And so we just increased the base rent. If it was $25, we increased it to $26.90, and included an energy budget as part of that. It allowed us not to become a utility, and then we provided an energy budget based on plug loads of 7 EUIs per square foot. So anything above that, we charge additionally for, we buy RECs and pass it through directly to the tenant. And what that gives us before depreciation and tax credits is about an 8% cash-on-cash return on an annualized basis with no financing. Next slide. And one of the things that we're learning is a lot of these ideas in a market rate world are somewhat easier said than done. We're in the process right now of negotiating an all-electric restaurant. It's a small restaurant, only about 1,800 square feet of interior space. And so we're looking at models around the region and a couple around the country for an all-electric restaurant. But as you can imagine, that's changing the way that restaurants work or chefs typically work. And it kind of sets up Ken and some of his next conversation in terms of the operational side of it. From an operations standpoint, we've created a green lease that RMI has helped us with. We've created some concepts in terms of plug load budgeting and purchasing RECs for anyone who busts their budget. And we've also created a process of annual surveys and annual recommissioning, especially if someone exceeds their budget. Next slide. And we're in the process right now of designing the next 2 buildings to go along with these 2 buildings that are right next to each other. And what we've realized, and Integral is helping us with this one also, is that it's a very site-specific process. EHDD and Coburn, who've worked with us on the design side, created a very unique configuration for the first 2 buildings. And we're finding that the next 2 buildings, because we don't have the benefit of being on the railroad tracks, will require their own unique configuration and unique strategies. And in some cases, more of a solar umbrella that's overhanging. This project is half office and commercial and half residential. So it'll be us moving into our first net zero residential project that hopefully will start construction next fall. Next slide. And I think the only way that we've been able to do what we've done and get as far as we can in a market rate building, that we're really building at market rate cost, so we're competing with other buildings in town from a price standpoint, really was to bring in a pretty educated team from the very beginning. EHTD had lots of experience in net zero buildings. Integral has experience across the country. Coburn brought great local experience, and Huntsman Architectural Group, who's helped us with the interiors, has been involved in a number of highly sustainable interiors focused on employee comfort. So I'd say without that team, we would have been stumbling around trying to get to net zero. And with the team that we have, we're hopeful that we'll be able to be certified by NBI after our first full year of operations. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Fantastic example of market rate and also that interesting aspect of vertical use of photovoltaics. I'm going to introduce Kenner Kingston, President of Architectural Nexus. Kenner, you have control, and we'll see how that goes.
Great. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Excellent.
All right. Fantastic. Well, the conversations today really do point toward this discussion about a part of sustainability, regenerative design, ZNE design that is harder to control than the building or the engineering or the systems, and that is the people inside. So just a little bit more about me. I have the privilege of leading a group of diverse design professionals in an integrated practice that includes site design, interior design, graphic design, branding, as well as architectural design. We like to think of ourselves as a large firm with a small firm culture, and in that regard, we're very people-oriented, people-driven. And so that kind of sets up the discussion about why an architect is so interested in talking about the people inside the building, not just about the people. So here are two takeaways from this final portion of today's presentation. Buildings are an outcome, not a purpose. I think the majority of us in the AEC industry have lost track of our real purpose. We have to remember that, and I'm at the top of the list of culprits here, as exciting as it is to receive certifications and awards, if the buildings aren't serving the purpose, the people inside them, then they're really not doing the job that they're meant to do. And so point two, people are the point, not the buildings, especially in high-performance buildings. That we've all seen the graphs and the diagrams that clearly explain how in a high-performance building, plug loads are the dominant load. And that is a load that is, if you're not talking to people, you're going to have a very hard time affecting change. I'm hoping for a slide change here, and looks like I'm going to have you advance my slides too.
I've got it.
All right. All right, so we're talking about people, and we're talking about dirty, messy, complicated people who have lots of problems to solve each day, not including saving energy, and the combination of our focus as an industry on all of the building systems parts of the energy pie and the natural reluctance of occupants to deal with the reality facing the universe that we live in means that the challenge continues. But really, the people are the only part that matters. Discretionary waste is the target. We're not talking about productive use of energy. The productive use of energy is never a target in our discussions. Where, frankly, our industry is very well trained to deliver high-performance buildings. And so now we need to turn our attention to the low-hanging fruit, the building occupants. Next slide, please. And so the image that's coming up is an image of a building that our company purchased at the onset of the recession when the economy was in a situation that provided us a great deal on a very ugly building. It's interesting because the Great Recession, an ugly building at 4,500 feet in a climate in Salt Lake City, in a climate that has 100-degree summers and 20-degree winters, the huge daily temperature swings, 4 seasons, snow removal. The way I came to the problem of people as a focus is that our building has not been a typical high-performance building. Many high-performance buildings that get a lot of attention are buildings that are on the coast. And in, you know, one of the things I appreciated about the NBI conference that this presentation comes from is that it was in Denver. You know, I think it's a more challenging climate, and I think there's a lot to be said about the way the snow interacts with net zero buildings. It's a fun trick to solve. Next slide, please. And so as we think about and talk about regenerative design and the role of people in it, I come to kind of a critical moment in my career where we have transformed the building. We've done kind of a magic trick to it with a very small 999 square foot addition, and done all the things architects would normally do. Optimize the building, high performance equipment, extra insulation, high performance glass, fixed shading, you name it. And ultimately found that the occupants were very uncomfortable, and that the whole process of being a building owner, we had been a tenant in somebody else's building before, led me to the conclusion that we needed to take on the operations ourselves, not outsource that, not hire a property manager, and really get to know, understand, and appreciate what it is we do to building owners in the design profession as we hand buildings off. That transition is often a punch list and a bill and an invoice and you're gone, when really the work is just beginning. Next slide. And so the Platinum building that developed out of that effort was not really operating to our expectations. And so as we departed on a quest for LEED EB Platinum, we started to really realize that there were only so many operational levers we could pull, and that we needed to really focus in on occupant engagement and comfort and develop a true appreciation for the operational implications of this industry that we're all in. And I now believe every architect should own and operate their own building. I think there's a level of authenticity and knowledge and learning that comes with this experience. Well, we pioneered this infographic on the left for our own building to try to help us start to communicate internally to the occupants about how we're doing, where we're going, what our targets are, and you know, portions of it speak to EUI, portions of it speak to energy use breakdown, portions of it speak to emissions. Whatever the individual readers' needs are, we try to find a way to satisfy that with information, of course coupled with training and whatnot. But we found it wasn't quite enough. And as we started to take these series of post-occupancy evaluation services centered around sustainability and regenerative design out to counties and cities in states along the Wasatch Front and then beyond into California, we started to realize that we were going to have to get to this at a deeper level. Next slide, please. And so we found a partner. We're in the second stage of the evolution of our occupant engagement behavioral energy programs at this point. We've partnered with a technology group, Sustain3, you can see their logo there at the bottom, that has developed a web-based platform that helps us drive change at the individual occupant level through gamification. Gamification is something that I've been watching for more years than we've been a building owner, and trying to figure out how do you work this into running a business or providing services to folks who are interested in ZNE buildings. Well, we're now in our third year of the program, dubbed UMatter at the University of Utah. And the program is the behavioral component of the university's Better Buildings Challenge effort, trying to help them, support them as they work on long-term carbon reduction goals. Again, all of the low-hanging, all of the easy stuff that they already know to do, all of the engineering solutions, all the architecture solutions, those are backed up into a big pile called deferred maintenance that is measured in millions and millions of dollars. And so being able to approach them with solutions to driving down energy usage without having to tap capital budgets is kind of a key issue. We've had tremendous success with huge rates of engagement in the College of Science and a 25% plug load reduction result in the art and architecture program. Next slide, please. So how do we do it? Process is the key here. The platform Sustain3's platform works by understanding that individual occupants have a limited bandwidth. Their time is precious, and that they're all motivated by very different things. For some folks, it's going to be peer pressure. For some folks, it's going to be rewards. For others, it's going to be competition. For others, it's going to be information and learning. And so you have to kind of figure out how can you access that. And I think this platform has done that. What is common to all of the motivations that get people to change their behavior in a building is that they don't take place. The change doesn't occur unless someone does something. So the key to the platform is that there's a call to action in the program on a weekly basis that tries to move passive occupants into active inhabitants by getting them to do something different. And what happens is if you get enough people doing something different in a common platform, then you start to see a culture emerge. It's extremely successful in places where a culture already exists, such as in our office. We employ the program here in our office because we've taken this LEED Double Platinum goal that we had in Salt Lake City and leveraged it in our Sacramento office to work on a Living Building Challenge building that we just opened at the end of last year. And we feel like doing is the key. Next slide, please. And so as you can see from the pictures, it's a web-based platform that is accessible on any device, anywhere, anytime, that allows users who are very busy to get an opportunity to connect to the information that they're looking for to learn and advance a culture of sustainability inside their organization. And it's a pretty straightforward process of having episodic competitions, weekly learn and earns, the short quiz. You unlock actions each week that allow you to earn points for your team or for yourself, and then we can report back results through whether it's the meter change at the building or through metrics that are built into the platform itself. Next slide. And so it's been crucial to us. We've been training our occupants for a year prior to occupancy. We've moved in now. Systems are fundamentally commissioned. They're still being tuned. And we've entered our Living Building Challenge, or ZNE, performance period. And as we do that, it's crucial that we continue to train them with very site-specific training that gets to the issues of how to use your building. Now, our folks in Salt Lake are excited about it, and they're still participating even though they're not in the building in Sacramento, because they want to learn, how does a gray water system work? How does a rainwater to potable system work? How do our energy use reduction strategies culminate in a ZNE scenario? Last slide. And so the thing I would say at the conclusion here is just to say, if you're involved in a net zero project or a net positive energy project or slogging through EBOM, trying to figure out if you're going to be able to have your LBC goals realized, or just getting a green team aloft, you really, the X factor in the conversation is the people. If you talk to design professionals about this problem, we're going to keep coming to you with design solutions. I strongly suggest that, after all, buildings are for people. Why wouldn't they be the answer?
Thank you, Kenner. Fantastic. I want to give thanks also to the people who have been on the line and that we're just right at the end of the hour, but there's a window of time for, looks like the majority of people have stayed online. Stacy, do you have questions that you can pose to Andy or Kenner or others?
Can you hear me, Kathy? Sorry about that.
All right, well, let me, pardon me?
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, there you are.
Sorry, I don't know what happened, but I just want to let everybody know, just to remind folks, that these slides will be available after the webinar, and also we're recording this, so there'll be an on-demand version that you can refer back to. I do have some questions for the folks that have stayed and are interested, and I'll just say, you know, one of the common themes that I'm seeing in the questions is really about cost. So, you know, just asking the folks that presented case studies and the other panelists who have experience with these types of buildings, you know, what are you seeing as the incremental cost, you know, doing a zero net energy performing building versus maybe a code minimum building or some other building that you would typically see on the market?
This is Andy. I'll at least try to answer that. From our perspective, our hard costs for 100,000 square feet are, including tenant improvements and finishes, just over $300 a square foot, and the full building is about $400 per square foot when you add land, consulting fees, soft costs, and others into it. And that puts us at the high end of the new market in this geography in Colorado. I would say that when we look back at it, and as others may know, it's difficult to segregate back to what a code minimum building would be, because insulation and figuring out the actual wall or window differences is a little tough. But I would say that our guess is that it's somewhere in the 20% premium over a code building to get to net zero in our climate for a new building of this construction type. We also just met with the City of Boulder recently to try and help them look at a modest size renovation, about a 25,000 square foot renovation of one of their buildings that they were trying to get to net zero. And there we kind of worked backwards as a group and suggested that the premium for renovation might be in the 20 to 25% range. So at least that's what we're seeing in the marketplace right now in Colorado.
Anyone else have thoughts on that? Okay. So there was another, and I think Kathy, maybe we can follow up too with some of the cost information that we're seeing. There was a question just related, there were some questions related to specific technologies in some of the projects, particularly Boulder Commons, that I think maybe we'll just follow up directly. But there were a couple questions related to, storage as an aspect of these buildings and whether most of the buildings you were seeing and working on had a storage component and like an energy storage component, and then just specifically a reference to, the building drawing from the car batteries, like electric car batteries. So I was hoping someone could respond to that.
Yeah, this is Brett Moss in LA. So the Net Zero Plus ETI definitely has storage. We've got about 300 kilowatt hours, excuse me, of utility grade lithium ion storage. We are about to do a phase 2, and we'll right now we're looking at probably doubling that. That amount of storage currently is enough to take us through an overnight event using the building in what we're referring to as an emergency mode. Again, my system, this system here, is capable of vehicle to grid charging. My understanding to date, the only commercially available vehicle that can work in that manner is the Nissan Leaf, but I believe that we've got other manufacturers, that's my understanding, that are have those vehicles on the drawing board.
And this is Andy. For the Commons, we don't at the moment have storage. We're actually, all 55 spaces are designed to be EV spaces, and the plan is to provide for, in the future when the car technology is there, the ability to go car to grid. We are now working on with the City of Boulder on a pilot program, or starting to explore one, where we'll look at resiliency and storage for one of the two buildings and probably benchmark against them, benchmark one against the other, primarily in terms of demand shaving, peak demand shaving. But when I look at it from a pure kind of private sector market perspective, we have a tough time justifying the cost of storage in today's market conditions, but I think that's going to change.
Okay. This question's for Kenner. There's kind of a two-part. So first, can you comment on the specific behavioral changes that have been impactful in the commercial buildings that you've worked on as part of your program? And then just a related question about maybe fatigue for people in sort of the interactive tools, and how you keep people interested and coming back and continuing to participate?
Oh, those are really good questions. Sometimes the platform is paired with a plug load study. We deploy watt meters into a location to measure specific utilization. So we're not quoting national averages or DOE level information. We're giving them really specific consumption information for their location. And every time I go to deploy watt meters, I always think I'm a little worried that this is going to be a more efficient group than I've seen in the past, and I'm not going to find the waste I need to point out the problems. I'm never surprised. Basically, auditing people's workstations, you find everything from full kitchenettes to very dangerous space heaters, et cetera. And so everything from, and then we can tailor the educational content to what we see. We've seen situations where faculty groups are fundamentally on desktop PCs pulling 100 plus watts because of backbone infrastructure technology at their VPN or remote desktop scenarios that kind of force them into that scenario, when they'd much prefer some kind of mobile computing platform that connects to Blade servers and whatnot. So we've seen everything of that kind of IT infrastructural solutions all the way down to the basics. People constantly disable power saver features, disable power saver features, and for some reason believe their screensavers are still saving their screens, even though it's not 1995. So there is always a big range of things we can affect, and it kind of depends on where you're at. In certain we've done this effort in some laboratories and found that talking to them about their behaviors and how they're running certain of the benchtop equipment, which ones are taking a lot, if they just knew which ones are taking a lot of energy, would their behavior change, and been able to connect information and a call to action to reduced energy in a variety of settings, including manufacturing, government office, private office, you name it.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll do one last question because
I'm sorry, I didn't actually answer the fatigue part.
Oh, right, yeah, absolutely.
The best way to battle fatigue is it's through the competition. What we've observed with our clients is when they hit fatigue, it's because the theme associated with a particular topic and competition goes too long. We feel like 3 months is the longest you can do. 1 month is not quite enough, and so we're always trying to tell our clients, set your competitions up, your teams, your themes, energy to waste, to water, sustainability topics. Set those up in small chunks so that people don't get too bored. They need some kind of a refresh. And ultimately, I think long-term fatigue is a potential problem. We haven't found the limit of that edge yet. Some clients are multiple years into it, but we do change cohorts within the group. So great question.
Okay, thank you. Just given time, I'm going to ask one question, last question to each of the panelists. So this goes to, there's kind of two parts to this, but what are each of your company's motivations for pursuing ZNE? In other words, why did you get into this? And then I think the other piece is just how much do policies and programs, how much did they influence you, and how much do they help you drive change or drive these projects? So maybe I'll call on you. Andy, you want to go first?
Sure. I got into it from a kind of personal desire standpoint, and my background is urban planning, and I got into development to change the way that people do development. And we have a wonderful partner who's one of the bigger impact investors in the country, and our goal is to create a modest size by real estate portfolio standards, several $100 million to $500 million portfolio of sustainable net zero buildings in Boulder, San Francisco, and Austin, Texas, so to show that they can work at a market rate in 3 different climates, and to try and do our job to kind of push the needle a little bit in the institutional investment environment. But we're also interested in changing policy, and so we're sharing a redacted version of our net zero lease. We'll be sharing our energy data every year. We'll be sharing our costs, and we'll be sharing that not only with others in the profession, but also with politicians and policymakers, so that hopefully they can see by a studied example that changing policies to require more sustainable buildings can be done in the market and absorb it, and ultimately over time we hope and believe that those portfolios and buildings will perform better financially than more traditional buildings. So that's our motivation.
Thanks. Brett, you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. So the why, you know, when you're the Electrical Training Institute, I think that sort of explains the why. You know, we need to do this. There was no doubt that we are in the middle right now of an energy revolution. The way that we use energy, the way that buildings use energy, it is dramatically changing. My board of trustees, again, decided, you know, when we started looking at this project a couple of years ago, that we needed absolutely to be out in front. When we moved into this facility, again, probably around 2002, we were early adopters of an awful lot of this technology. Our campus is a living laboratory. So in 2012, we deployed the first privately owned microgrid in the States. This is just a logical next step. Again, as we've talked about, just as we've seen the cost of solar go down and go down dramatically over the last couple of years, so will we see the same with energy storage. So again, it was really critical that we stay out in front of this new technology and prepare for what's next.
Great, thank you. Kenner, you talked about this a little bit already, but maybe you can elaborate on the policy and the program piece.
Yeah, you bet. You know, just briefly touching on why, because purpose is a key issue. In addition to everything else that's been said, I think authenticity really matters. There's a lot of folks in this space that are interested in prescribing net zero for others, but not for themselves. And so it's really important that we as design professionals don't just talk the talk. Policy is, it's interesting that you would ask me to focus in on policy. We're in a market right now that is utility commission, and the primary utility is there's a little bit of some regression going on regarding net metering and whatnot, and there's some question marks over a lot of folks' heads in terms of where is this going to go and how are we going to pull it off. You know, at a community level, it's obviously the thing that drives change, and the kinds of progressive, helpful policies and decisions that have been made for the last decade or so have done a lot nationally, regionally, locally to improve the climate for this kind of a thing, which humanity needs, because it ties back to the place we live and the problems we're having climatologically. But even within an organization, policy matters. You know, I meet a lot of folks who are trying to change behaviors inside their organization, and without at least a little bit of top-down effort in the form of internal policies saying we will buy Energy Star rated equipment, or we will implement a workstation watt budget. It's hard for groups for that complete culture of conservation to form.
Thank you. Okay, and last but not least, Neil, you want to share your thoughts?
I think he may have had a commitment and is no longer online.
Drop off. Okay.
So we'll thank all the other people online.
Definitely. You want to close, Kathy?
Yes, as Stacy said, you'll be able to download this presentation, and we thank you very much for joining us, and especially for staying for the extended time period. We look forward to you joining us in the future webinars that NBI offers.
Thanks, everybody.